starts the meeting.
Okay, we're live now. But okay, so I have one attendee. Just a minute. Oh, there are more. Okay, now there are a whole bunch of attendees.
So
Okay,
maybe they can come in using, from the attendee route now.
okay, so just bear with me, just bear.
Now it's connecting.
All right, good.
I can see you, Andy, I can see you.
Okay, I got it. We'll take it from here. I don't know what's gonna happen yet. Okay, thank you.
Can somebody promote me in?
Yeah, Dan, yeah.
I'm trying to, but I can't.
Right.
Is Dana in with a telephone number? Because here she is. Okay, okay.
Hi, how's it going?
Technical difficulties, Dana, this evening.
Okay,
Okay.
Peggy, Dana, you're on, okay? Is there anybody else? Elsa is there? Hold on.
Peggy
Yeah,
Jackson. should
Elsa's
be on
trying to get in. She just texted me.
Can you guys see me? Because I don't think I have an option to show my face.
there. No, I can't see you.
Okay, got it.
It's a bummer.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
We have
So-
Ruben.
So Dana is in, just a minute.
Let's just make sure we can hear Ruben. Elsa.
Hi,
Okay, we can hear, and we can see Elsa.
great.
Okay, so you should be able to see Dana now too. Dana, are you there?
Yeah, hi guys.
There you
Hi.
are. Okay. Is there anybody else that I'm missing at this point?
Peggy.
Don't see Peggy. Peggy, are you there yet?
I really look forward to when we can meet in person again.
We know.
So Dan, can you just tell the public that we're having some difficulties and we will be.
Everybody, if you can hear us, we're having a little technical difficulty. And we're trying to get everybody squared away, so just bear with us and we'll be with you shortly.
If Peggy's indicating that she can see but can't speak.
But I can't find her. That's part of the problem. I cannot find her.
Oh, and then Dave is on. Dave Finch, can you let him in? Dan? Dave
I can see him, just hold on. Dave should be on now.
Oh, that's definitely better.
Hey, Dave.
Hi.
But just bear with me because I cannot find Peggy. Says there are 25 attendees, but I can't get to them all.
All right, so Peggy can I let her in or not?
Let her
No.
in.
You can let, you don't have the authority to, that's the problem.
All right, on mine at least, she's about fifth from the bottom.
But I can't get to the bottom. That's part of the problem. And I don't know why.
I can. Can I let her in? No.
Okay, I finally got. Peggy, are you in?
Yep, she's on. Peg, you
There she is.
muted.
All right. Awesome, Peggy. There you are. Take off the mute.
John,
Got it.
Okay, Tony, you need a motion to open the meeting.
All right, can I have a motion to open the March 22nd, 2022 Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee meeting? Andrew, second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so this is the March 22nd Village of Mamaroneck Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee meeting. Welcome all. As I say every month or from the last couple, our dates of the meetings are posted on the village website. Sorry for the delay. We had technical difficulties, as you may have heard. We have a big agenda tonight, and I'm going to pick and choose what we present just because we're not going to have enough time. I'd like to start with the minutes, which is item 3 anyhow. February 22nd, which I circulated both to us on the committee and was posted on the village website. So do I have a motion to approve the February 22nd minutes?
Tony, I was absent on that evening, so I will.
I'll make a motion.
All right, second,
Second.
now just Elsa in favor, ayes or nays?
Aye.
Ayes.
Aye. Dana, you missed, right?
Yes, I wasn't there.
Okay. So the minutes for the February 22nd meeting are approved. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna have to start with updates, and the item 4 is Army Corps update. So Dan, what I think I'd like to do is just give an update on where we are, and then just have a couple of questions from the public. We're not going to be able to answer everybody's question, I don't think, but we'll give it a shot. Okay. So,
Okay, just Tony, for those who want to comment, you need to raise your hand and I'll relay that to Tony and he will allow either say we can let you speak or not.
And,
Okay.
and if I can, Tony and Trustee Natchez, if individuals have questions, they can also, I believe, type it in.
I don't
So
think there's a chat, Andy.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Okay.
Yep.
okay, so the flood committee, I got on in December, probably since Ida, the flood committee, FMAC as we call ourselves, has been asking to have a meeting with the village. Okay, and
With the Army Corps.
with the Army Corps, I'm sorry. Thanks, Peg. And the reason to have the meeting was to try to do it as kind of a construction project, to have a kickoff meeting. And the purpose of a kickoff meeting is to kind of get everybody on the same page. What are you doing? When are you doing it? How are you doing it, et cetera. So also the FMAC put together a list of questions for the Army Corps, which Peg as chair sent to the Corps in the
In
fall.
November. In
In
November,
November.
early December.
And again, those questions had to deal with things that were in the previous plan that perhaps might have changed because of the amount of Ida flooding, and or things that we might want to tweak, as the Army Corps calls it. Anyway, that really didn't go too well. So when I got on in December, I heard the frustration from the committee members, and I started to go after to try to have that meeting. And I wasn't much more successful. The only thing I was successful at, and this is kind of a bit of a joke, is that I found out that the village did meet with the Army Corps, which is great. And the good news is that the project is progressing, and the Army Corps has the sign-offs from DEC and the state and the feds, and they are starting to design the project. So I
Tony, can you just inform everybody as to when that meeting took place?
Okay, so that meeting, so I will, Dan. So basically, I basically asked that I have an update from either the mayor or Jerry, our village manager, Jerry Barbario, and I had a quick discussion with Mr. Barbario this afternoon, and I had drafted some questions, which I'm now just going to go through them. I'll try to be clear and concise, but that's what I tried, and I have the answers from the village. So, like I say, the good news, the project's moving ahead, and so.
When was that meeting, Tony?
Yes,
Meeting was on March 10th.
March 10th,
March
2022,
10th.
right? And basically, the village was there.
Who from the village?
The mayor and Jerry Barbieri, reps from the county, the state, the feds, and the Army Corps, right?
So just from the village, Tony, it was the mayor and the village manager. That's it?
That's it, from what I understand. And I'm just trying to paraphrase what I spoke to Jerry about this afternoon, okay? I asked why the FMSC wasn't invited, and basically was told that the Army Corps wants to have a public meeting at 60% design, And at that point, we'll be able to get all of our questions answered. I asked, would we get questions to the letter that the FMAC sent in November? And the answer was basically, we don't know, but you can definitely get them at the 60% design. I asked, what is the schedule for the project? Basically, the design schedule, they feel that for the first 4 parts, which I'm going to go over in a minute, 4 to 8 months to get to 60%, right? So Jerry said, 6 months is probably what they're shooting for, and that's about what. So,
Tony,
then
is
I
that
said, okay.
is that 48 months from their meeting on March 10th or 4 to 8 months from another date certain?
Well, I think it's 4 to 8 months from, they started design like late January, early February. So probably around February 1st, I think. That's as accurate as I can be. And I wouldn't,
Sure.
that's as accurate as I can be. I then asked, okay, which parts of the project are they designing first, right? So I'm just going to list the parts. Ward Avenue Bridge and channel widening, Waverly Avenue Bridge and channel widening, non-structural. And I said, okay, what do you mean by non-structural? Home elevations. And then the last piece was the culvert on the Jefferson Avenue Bridge.
Oh,
I then said, well, at least with the culverts in Jefferson Avenue parking lot, not bridge, Jefferson Avenue parking lot, there are concerns that might not be the best solution. Do you think there'll be an ability for us and the village to tweak that and, maybe do other things like an open channel flow, something like that? And Jerry was basically, I really don't know. I don't know where the Corps' head's at, but he thought that there would be an ability to tweak that design. Because I said, Ida, we all know clogged up the bridge, right? The Plaza Avenue Bridge. How is a tunnel not going to get blocked? So he thought that there was a possibility that the Army Corps would redesign it. That's what I gathered. And at the moment, that's as much information as I have. And like I say, I'd like to be positive because we got $88 million. It's all signed and sealed. They're proceeding with the design. They're expecting to have a public meeting at 60%, which if we take an estimate of 6 months, that would be February 1st. So March, April, May, June, July, August 1st, that would be the 6 month. And, could be sooner, could be a little bit later, but that's about that's the gist of it. So I'll take a few questions from
I'd
FM.
like to make a few points if I may. The flood committee sent a memo to the village of Mamaroneck on September the 21st with 20 some odd points of questions that we had based on Ida. We have not had 19 of them, excuse me. We have not had any answered. On October 28, we sent a further memo to the village of Mamaroneck. And we sent 26 points, and that has not been answered. We sent an email to the Army Corps of Engineers in November, and the Army Corps response was, these questions are very pertinent. We look forward to meeting with you to discuss them. We then met with the Village of Mamaroneck board in early December, and we were asked to pick out our 5 top points out of the Army Corps memo.
Out of the 20, yep.
Out of the 28, and we did. And the first one on everyone's agreed list was we need to have a meeting with the Army Corps. And the mayor and the village manager said, we are in the process of trying to put that together. That still hasn't happened. We then sent a further memo this Saturday, the 19th, to the Army Corps from the committee with a shortened, tightened request list. And basically saying, we have some different points of view. We'd like to make sure that all the different neighborhoods are included. And we're trying, this was compiled over many months of people's input from the community. And we find out that there was a meeting held, no reporting was done back to us as a committee. And I'm I think this is totally wrong.
Peggy, if I can,
Please.
this started in the 80s with round one. We lost that. Tony, as you know, and you well articulated several years ago, this is the second bite at the apple. We cannot afford to lose the second apple. The entire community, not just one or two parts of this community, the entire village depends upon the success of this. Transparency is absolutely key. The fact that we are just finding this out is outrageous and completely and utterly unacceptable on so many different categories. We have 20,000 plus in this community. We have the right to know. The members of this committee have the right to know. The fact that we had two individuals on behalf of the village only attending this meeting and we're just finding this out now is completely and utterly unacceptable, and it's clearly not transparent. As chair of the Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee in the past, when I was in Washington in 2017, we prefaced, and it was paramount, transparency and participation of the village of Mamaroneck.
Andy,
This is
I'm going
not-
to interrupt for 1 sec. In addition, we were included as the FMAC in all these meetings. We
We
were
were in-
invited to participate.
We were in the city, where in
Yep.
one room sat a community in Long Island, and we sat in the other. Guess what? The other community got the exit. We got to go on to Washington because it was a collective effort of private residents, the municipality, state representatives, and county representatives. We need to do this, and we need to do it now. And you know what, Tony? I'm not venting at you. I'm not venting at Trustee Natchez. This has to go back up to all of our elected officials, including the village manager and assistant village manager. We need to work together. Transparency is paramount. There are 30 people online tonight that all have probably questions, most of whom they have certain issues. We all have different issues, but one in common is flooding. And this isn't a silver bullet, but it's certainly going to help tremendously everyone in this community, irrespective of where you're located. We deserve answers. We deserve transparency.
And we want the project to be the best it can be for the entire village of Mamaroneck.
And
Anybody
Tony-
that's getting wet is getting, regardless of socioeconomic status, religion, race, creed, we're all getting flooded. We all need to pull together and make this happen for everyone, and it needs to be the best it can for everyone.
And there are certain changes since 2017 when we initially got approved. IDA served as an example. Many areas that didn't get impacted in 2007 definitely got destroyed and impacted a couple months ago. So the concept of tweaking this, it's not about changing it or changing direction. It's about making it better.
We
How
also,
can we make it better?
we also have a point of view on this committee, as many of us are flood victims, that is different than what the village manager or the mayor may have. We're not asking Corps to change the project. We're asking them to talk to us and communicate with us about our thoughts.
I think, Chair Gelber, I think we should open this up to the public, but I will say this, a meeting with the mayor, a meeting with the village manager or deputy village manager is absolutely paramount. We have to have their participation. The village manager or deputy manager should absolutely be part of our communications, part of our meetings. We used to, in 2017, every
They
single
always
meeting
were.
we had.
They always were.
We're
Since
always present.
2007, we never had a meeting without the village manager or the assistant village manager.
It's very important to have this. We have to assure transparency. Again, we all don't have to agree. We didn't all agree on 2017, but the plan that did come down the pike finally took a bit of all of the input. We have to continue that theme. So I would urge, Tony, that we reach back out to the village manager and our mayor and ask for additional participation in our meetings. Please.
Can I ask, is that a, so Andrew, you're asking that, and Peg, that A, we have more communication with the village manager and the mayor. But specifically, let me finish, that specifically that we have, as we had in the previous round, either the village manager or the assistant village manager participate in our meetings, correct?
Absolutely.
That's a given. But I think Andrew's going farther and saying we need to try and get on the Army Corps' schedule to have a discussion with them. We want to talk to them. We're not going to try and, we want the project to be better. And we're working in a vacuum because nobody's talking to us and nobody's communicating with us.
Okay, so I hear that I definitely hear that. I mean, I've been hearing that since December.
No,
Not
Tony,
that-
since September, we've been asking for answers to questions and
Meg, I'm not
not one thing has been
disagreeing
answered.
with you at all. Okay, I said I wanted to keep the meeting positive tonight. So I think the fact that we know there was a meeting, we got some input from our leaders on what happened at the meeting is a step in the right direction. Because up until this afternoon at 3:30, we were pretty much in the dark, right? So I
And
think
Tony,
we
you
made-
know what? As chair of our committee, you're our leader. And you know what? I'm sorry that you just found out today. This is something that I wish in the future, you know what? This is a teachable moment. Going forward, again, transparency, communication has to work that way. Otherwise, then the committee we get put in a corner, and then the fine residents of our community then say, well, what's going on? Why don't we know what's going on? One thing I commend you and Peg back when you guys were co-chairs back in 2017, when we were going through all this. One thing that we did, we had so many meetings. We had meetings when we weren't even scheduled to participate, to get the involvement of our community, whether or not the elected officials or village managers or whomever else showed up, we still were there. You and Peggy were there.
We had
Brian was there.
conversations with
Right.
Gene Brickman, who was running the project. Matt Crosby would talk to us. We have no communication
So
with the court at
let's
all.
use this as a teachable moment. Let's make it positive, Tony. Let's use this as a teachable
Make it
moment.
happen.
And let's go forward. And I think we should open it up so the rest of the community can be heard this evening.
Okay, so Dan, do you want to?
Michael Bianco has his hand up. Michael, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say, and I'm sure that Tony might have more to say later, but I just wanted to say, after hearing the criticisms from Peggy and others, so far, all we were told is that there was, I believe, one meeting, or maybe it was two, and that we know that the meeting happened, and I felt like it was said in a way that it was like an accomplishment, and I just think that a lot of residents are really tired of hearing things like that, and they just want to see some progress made.
Thank you,
So are
Michael.
we.
Informed each step.
So
Okay,
are
but
we.
hang on a minute. Michael, you still on?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Okay, so yes, I'm saying I want to be positive because I think that's the way I am and that's the way I operate. And the last time I was the chair of the committee, we had so much teeth gnashing, yelling, screaming, it was ridiculous. And I just kept saying, no, we got to be positive and make this thing work. And so that's what I'm saying again tonight. We got to be positive and make this thing work. I'm saying we found out that there was a meeting. We did get some information, and I don't know whether you heard, but they identified the 4 parts of the project that they're designing right now. And so we're better off to me today, right now, than we were a week ago or 3 days ago, because right now I'm being as transparent as I can. As much as I have a little more information than I had a week ago, a day ago, right?
Tony,
So-
if I can just interrupt, I think what Michael's also saying is not a matter of just having a meeting, but the transparency of communicating that back to the people. If this meeting was held back on March 10th, it's March 22nd, that was 12 days ago. That there's no reason, with the amount of mass media and Instagrams and Facebooks, there's means to get the messages out. So it's one thing to have the meeting, but get the message out so people understand that what is being done, how many steps forward we're taking. I think, again, this is a teachable moment of how we can communicate, not just with Mitigation, but to 20,000 people that call Mary Nicole.
But the most guiling thing about all of this is that it wasn't communicated to the committee and it wasn't communicated to the public. What is happening behind closed doors, and it's just wrong.
Okay. Next up is Kelly. Kelly, go ahead. You have to unmute.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for letting me talk for a second. I just kind of as a newcomer to this whole program, I wanted to know, is there a way that we can get a place at that table that they're having a meeting? It sounds to me from what Peggy was saying, that they've been pushing us off and not really being inclusive in their discussions with the Army Corps. And I just wanted to see if there's a way in your experience in the past that we can move forward and have Tony or somebody at that meeting, you know, so that they can communicate back to us.
You're absolutely right. In the past, all of the members of the flood committee that could make the trips would go into the city or would go to Washington or would be on a conference call. The meetings were open to all of us and members of the public. Our frustration is your frustration because none of us have an avenue for communication at this point. And that
How do we, how can we move forward with that then? What's the step? How can we get that seat at the table?
I think what we need to do is make it clear to the mayor and the village manager that the committee and the public, if you agree with us, you should be writing emails that we don't find that this is acceptable. And that we would like it to the table.
Just for
That's a very-
clarification, the Board of Trustees was not informed about this meeting, and we met after the 10th.
In your point of, in fact, when we met and we had the hearing in Washington, some of us, including myself, went to Washington and
Right.
appeared before the Army Corps, whereas others actually met in the conference room at the regatta and actually participated from afar. But the key thing here, Kelly, is participation, transparency, and I will absolutely give Tony and Peg the credit. Back then, the community was extraordinarily splintered, but we were able, through communication, through open meetings, we're able to arrive at the concerns, convey those in a very articulate, non-emotional way to the Army Corps, and they were incredibly responsive. That's why we were able to secure it and bring back a good policy back to the Village of Mamaroneck.
It
So-
sounds like to me,
Okay,
we need to come up with a plan, maybe with us, on how we're gonna make our communications better. Maybe we should, I mean, how are we gonna do this? Because I think we're kind of saying the same thing, we know it, but I don't think we're really coming up with, what are we gonna do?
Problem, Steve, is not our communication. It's that there's no communication from the other end back to us, and that's got to change.
But we
Kelly,
could,
Kelly, let me.
There
Andrew,
are a
let me-
couple of other people who have not spoken.
Okay.
Dan, let me
You're-
let me respond to Kelly, okay, please? So a couple of people have asked me what they could do. And what I said was, as we did in 2016, 17, please come to the meetings.
absolutely.
So when I look at this list, that tonight there are quite a few people listening, I think this is key, that when everybody shows up, and as you all know, and thank you for showing up, that everyone kind of, the village, I think, is going to wake up to see, okay, people need information. It's not just Tony, Peg, and the FMAC who's saying they need information.
The entire village.
It's the entire village. So really, thank you all for coming on tonight. It's
And-
really
and Tony-
wonderful to see you.
Tony, as you're reading this, I'm looking at the side of who's on. I see individuals from every part of this community, whether it's the Heights, Washingtonville, Industrial, Orienta, Shore Acres. I'm seeing the commercial district. This is great. This is how it starts, Kelly.
Okay.
Maybe-
So,
yeah, Tony, maybe-
if I may, to move on, the next person was Dennis Drogan. Dennis, you're on. You have to unmute yourself. Are you there?
Dennis is on. Yeah, you're off. You're on. You can speak now, Dennis.
I am on, thanks. Sorry for joining late. This is Dennis Drogan, the Assistant Building Inspector. So I hear your concerns. I'll be sitting with the committee and listening to your concerns moving forward. And I'm making some notes in between. So as you have the concerns and they come up, I will stress them. And as for the remarks of the lack of communication from the village to the board, I think that there is growth inside of it, and there are some things still at the administrative level, and the trickle down should happen a lot quicker. not saying trickle down as being demeaning, but we have to see the flow of information to the board and back and forth. So a cleaner line of communication clearly has been stated is necessary at this point.
Dennis,
Welcome, Dennis, and thank you very much.
So Dennis, are
Absolutely.
you basically going to become our sort of liaison between the village, if you will, staff and Dan and the committee?
So the role has not been, I was put onto the board, but I'm
Not yet.
not very clear. I'm not very clear of the capacity
right.
of what I can accomplish through the board and the municipality at this point.
Dennis,
So-
but your commitment to the village and your experience here, I've seen firsthand, is extraordinary, and anything that you could provide will be helpful. And that's from personal experience with ongoing different transactions, which is much appreciated, Dennis.
And I
Thank you.
second that because I've worked with Dennis through real estate.
You're a
He's
constant
terrific.
professional. Thank
He's
you.
terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a thought, Tony. Maybe you could do this. Maybe you could petition to have a regular meeting with the village manager or the village, the right people. And this way, maybe if you can make something formal, a monthly meeting yourself, a 2 month, and maybe then you could, have a more formal communication with the mayor, with the
Schedule
head.
meetings.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the whole group.
Yeah, just Tony, just have a regular meeting, try to schedule a
Sure.
regular meeting.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Is there anybody else who has not spoken that wishes to speak? I see Kelly's hand is back up and Bernie's hand is back up. Tim O'Connor, you're on.
And Jimmy Abadi,
Well,
James.
I'm not seeing his hand up yet, so just bear with me.
Okay, good. Can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
All right, great.
Perfect.
Tim O'Connor, Washington Street. It's so heartfelt that that the board is not communicating back to the public as you letting us know what's going on with the Army Corps of Engineers project. What's unacceptable is that the Corps is waiting for 60% of the design work then to let the public know. That should be right out of the gate. We got technology here. At a minimum, these meetings could be recorded and added to the village website for people to look at a minimum. It's crazy that we're working these days, but from your standpoint, from the FMAC standpoint, what other projects can we look at or implement in parallel to the ACE?
That goes to the low hanging fruits, Tony.
Well, hang on. So Tim, I'm glad you brought that up because as you may have seen, our agenda is extremely long tonight. So we wanted to briefly touch on 2 other areas that and one of them was street and the similar problems, street flooding in both Washingtonville, the industrial area, as kind of one of the areas. And the second is street flooding in the Florence Park area. And both the Washingtonville and Florence sent me emails with, I would say, probably signed petition of like 50 people at least, something like that. So I was at the board meeting or the work session last Monday night, and Dan brought up what I thought was a good approach, which was then, I would say, seconded by the mayor and the board, that we hire an engineer to look at the street flooding. And we had originally discussed just Washingtonville and then maybe expanding it. So I think that, and I was planning to go back to the next work session to say that I'd like to look at the Washingtonville area, the industrial area. And in fact, I circulated a scope of work, a draft, which got put on the village website today, I think. So, and then I think, Dan, the board approved money for that study, correct?
The board of trustees, after I suggested it, has approved $150,000 for not just to study, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in another dust collector. We're great on those. I'm not interested in that, but a study with specific implementation plans and paths forwards for implementation on the flooding issues, and the area is from the I-95 overpass on Mamaroneck Avenue to at least Fenimore Road and maybe further into the industrial area, and from the Mamaroneck and Sheldrake Rivers over to I-95. So that basically are low-lying areas. Most of those streets do not have drainage except at the intersections and do not have enough pitch to run the water to the intersections. So that is part of the issue to try and attack flooding, not only to help in parallel with the Army Corps of Engineers plan, but more importantly for those non-episodic storms where we get flooding as well. The concept is to do a twofold approach to life.
But Tony and Dan, I would think Tim also wants to hear is the low-hanging fruits that we already have. We have a vac truck. We finally have a vac truck. Flood
All right, so
mitigation advisory committee work.
Andrew, just give me one more minute because I want to talk about. So Florence Park area residents also sent an email. So Dan, and committee, I'd like to try to do a similar approach to that area as we're doing, Dan, for the Washingtonville and industrial area. So I would like just to ask the members, would you support that, an effort similar to what Dan just described in Washingtonville and
Well,
industrial area?
can that all be looked at under the same $150,000 umbrella that's been funded?
I think you would need additional monies to do that, very candidly, and I'm all for doing that.
I think we should.
But I think the first step is to review what's already been studied in the Florence Park area, if you will, or it's actually,
Except wasn't it done in 1984 or something, Dan? It's no longer going to be valid.
no, but what the trouble spots that they have pointed up, would be still valid. They didn't disappear, they only got worse. So that's part of what
But if they're worse, then the engineers would have to determine how to fix it.
That's
properly,
exactly.
based on 2022 standards, not on 1984 standards.
So I
I
guess, do I have kind of I see Pegasus, so
Yep.
I'd like to have FMAC, I know Peg, you're saying yes. I'd like to
Absolutely.
add the Florence Park area to at least put before the BOT for an engineering study of options there.
I would second that, absolutely.
Definitely.
Elena,
Yep.
Stephen, yes. Any nays?
Yes.
No nays. Okay, great.
Okay. You have Jimmy Abadi who would like
Hold
to.
on, let's finish
Wait,
this
wait,
thought.
wait,
We're not
wait,
done with
wait.
this thought.
But wait, Tony, if we can go back.
Yes,
to
all right,
the
so
question
Andrew,
that
you're
you
up.
had
There are more issues of low hanging
About
fruit.
what we can do in conjunction to Army Corps. We have it right in front of us, whether it's the vac truck, maintaining the infrastructure that we have now. as
Road
it
to
is.
nowhere.
Road to nowhere, clearing debris under the underpasses before storms.
Yeah.
We used to do 72 hours, 48 hours, 24 hours out. There was a list of things that could be done.
And bridging, because the mountain by Grove Street
So
that is
in
in
essence,
the river is frightening. And
in
we have
essence-
asked this, and we're getting no answers.
in essence, there's a tremendous number, Tim, that's a great question. There's a tremendous amount of things that we coin as low hanging fruits that we can do today. In fact, I saw a vac truck on Fenimore and Hoyt today. They were doing an incredible job. It was great seeing this. It was refreshing to see. These are things that we can do today. So you're absolutely right. In conjunction to the Army Corps, what we as a village can do for ourselves to help ourselves. Good question, though.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tim. All right, well, how about one more, Dan,
If
and
I
then we
may,
gotta move.
Tony, I think
Yes.
you need to go back to the low hanging fruit memo that we put together. And that entire thing, in addition to the request for Florence Park, needs to go back to the Board of Trustees and the village manager's office.
All right, I will
Okay.
try to do that on the next work session.
Jimmy Abadi's had his hand up for a while. If you want one more. I
Yeah,
will-
one more.
Yeah, Lou Young is also.
Okay. You're on, Jimmy. Hold on, what happened?
No, he's not. I don't see him.
I don't see him at all.
He's on the right side still. He's above B.
No, just
So-
me. Okay. Hold on. We have a little technical trouble here. Here we go.
There he is.
There he is.
Okay, Jimmy. Nope, it's not working. Hold on a minute.
You have Lou's on. You promoted Lou. Trustee Young, just go on mute. Take the mute off.
Mr. Young, you're on mute. All right, so I guess.
Is there a way to get back to Jimmy Abate?
No, the computer is saying Jimmy can't talk because he's using an older version of Zoom and it's not compatible. I'm sorry about that. Jimmy, I don't know how to.
May I make a suggestion?
Oh, just let me do this. Let me promote him and then we can demote him afterwards. Go ahead, Jimmy. Are you on?
Yep, can see him.
There he is.
Jimmy, unmute yourself.
Now I can. Are you there?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, guys. My name's Jimmy Abadi. Listen, guys, all right, so I know you guys are trying to do the right thing. We're very frustrated to hear maybes and but, and you know, at this stage, I'm still, like everybody else in Mamaroneck, is still rebuilding, and it's March. Andrew, you said something good. My wife wrote a big email out about cleaning up and doing something until we can get the Army Corps of Engineer to do their job. But I gotta say, I need you guys as, what good is having a mitigation advisory committee if there's no communication? And I'm very frustrated, and I just want you guys to hear me. You know, we're talking about marijuana stores. We're talking about the affordable housing. We're talking about refrigerator. Listen, all of that is great. We got the biggest problem here is flooding in Mamaroneck, and we're getting destroyed as a community. I don't want to hear it no more, and I'm sure everybody here does not want to hear about any of that other stuff. The mayor, with all due respect, the only thing that should be coming out of his mouth is how we're going to correct this. And if he's not speaking to the mitigation committee, which is a flood committee, this makes no sense. And I guess what I'm asking you guys is somebody's got to be more aggressive. They don't have a right to go into a meeting and not address it with the mitigation committee. You guys are supposed to be able to sit down and advise each other what's going on, what can we do to make the village better so we don't flood so bad, okay? In the meantime, nobody's even called into the meeting or even asked their opinion.
Or even told the meeting happened.
Well, that's the problem here. And the main problem, and I'm going to say it, the mayor may not like it, it's coming from him and Jerry, because that, to me, is being sneaky. I don't care what you tell me. They need to speak to you guys and say, hey, listen, we're going to be sitting with the Army Corps of Engineers. Have you guys discussed anything? Do you guys have any input? What good is having a committee if you're not going to give them the input? You might as well just put duct tape on your mouth. I'm frustrated. I know everybody that lives in Mamaroneck, especially in the flats, okay, that got destroyed. I lived on Elliott Avenue. This is my fourth or fifth flood. I don't even remember anymore. This is the worst one. I'm just frustrated, and the only thing I do want to say is somebody's got to take the incentive to go and say, hey, we need to be in these meetings. Somebody's got to tell the mayor and Jerry that this can't happen again. You can't go into a meeting and not advise the committee, flood mitigation advisory committee. It doesn't make any sense.
This is a democracy, and it's not being run as a democracy right now.
Well, and I understand it, but we, as the taxpayers in this village that everyone got destroyed and lost tons of money, tons of personal things, luckily no life, thank God, okay? But the point is, what are we doing here in the village of Mamaroneck? I don't even know what's going on here myself. I listened to a meeting last week where the mayor and everybody was fighting and the mayor was getting defensive. The only thing that should be coming out of the mouth of the mayor is how are we going to fix Mamaroneck? How are we going to take care of this flood problem? It may flood again, okay? And I'm sure it's gonna. What can we do to make it better? What can we do right now to make it better? I don't want to hear about August or 6 months from now, the Army Corps of Engineer, because Andrew, I went through this with you several years ago. I brought pictures. I said, listen, guys, look at this. This is going to happen again.
Jimmy, in
And it got worse.
2017, we brought it home and we have to
Yes.
do it again. We brought
Yes.
it home through cooperation, transparency, and participation. We're going to bring it home again.
We
But
agree with you,
it's
Jimmy.
March. Let me just say, it's March. Okay, it's 7 months later, and we're just even talking about. I haven't heard or even seen the mayor come around about the floods. And I'm sorry, no disrespect, but this is the biggest problem of the village of Mamaroneck, and this
Well,
has to stop.
Both,
right,
Jim,
so-
both
so hang on.
residents and businesses alike. You're absolutely
We
right.
need your help.
So-
We need your help. Somebody in your committee has to go to the mayor and to Jerry and say, hey, you guys can't do this. What good is having a committee? You might as well just disregard the committee.
Tony, we stand behind you. Stephen,
agree.
Dana, Peggy, Elsa, we stand behind you.
All right,
We're
so
here.
Okay.
so I said I wanted to be positive
Well,
tonight.
that is very positive, Tony. That just,
And I'm Jimmy, I'm listening, believe me. And
okay.
I've been trying to be front and center with those two individuals, and I've made a little bit of progress. I think we need a huge amount more progress. And like I said, I'm so glad that people showed up tonight, including you, because it's very important. I mean, we got $88 million, so let's use it, right?
And yeah, and in the meantime, let's like, I got to tell you, a few people came down and they took a walk and we looked at the brooks. And if you look at what's going on around here, all the debris and everything, nobody's even cleaned up yet since the flood. It's disgusting. And that's
Jimmy,
another thing.
we have been asking since September for the village to do this. We are being ignored.
Right, and Jimmy,
Well-
I went around, took pictures of I sent it around to our committee, I sent it to the village of almost every piece of debris from Fenimore Road all the way up to the Thruway Bridge, right? And so I thank you for being here tonight. That's all I'm gonna say.
So Jimmy,
One more thing, and I know you got a lot of people. If you go and take a look at the homes, there's still tons of debris that was underwater that's contaminated out and about in our village, just laying out. Nobody's even cleaned it up. Now they did, listen, don't get me wrong. The village did a great job of taking the stuff that was thrown up, but there's still a lot of stuff that's left out in people's yards or whatever it may be. The brooks are filthy. I mean, they got to do something.
Jimmy, I'm not sure if you heard that Dennis of the village is hopefully going to be working with us. Also as a caveat of information back to the municipality, which will be hopefully very helpful. Again, he's the constant professional. And I'm sure if he's given the opportunity to do so, things like that. And I agree. These are things that can be done tomorrow. We don't have to wait for $88 million for that. You're
Andrew,
absolutely
the only thing I want to say, I'm going to shut up now.
no.
We need someone that's going to be aggressive. No more. We don't want to hear it anymore. We need
There we go.
aggressiveness. We need someone that cares about the village, that cares about the taxpayers, that cares about the public, that went through all of this. We all went through it together. We need
Stand
aggressive.
shoulder to shoulder, Jimmy.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you.
just had to say something here, please. I'm very disturbed at the fact that we are pointing fingers and the other parties are not here. So I totally agree with Jimmy. We, as a committee, the advisory committee, should be more aggressive. We are here to represent the public, to express the public opinion, and we have to be more aggressive. We have to be on top of this. We have to, if they say no, we have to keep insistent. So I think we have to be more aggressive. We have to be more proactive, and we don't have to take no for an answer. And
Thank you.
we have
Thank
to
you.
stop blaming others and do our part ourselves.
Thank you, Elsa.
Hello?
Chair Board, if I may, this is Dennis Drogan again. So just remark to what Jimmy was asking for was somebody to walk the river. There is debris around. I know the village did put a great amount of time and effort into mediating and cleaning up the stream and the Mamaroneck River. I'll go out and take a look in my time and see what I can put together and maybe make a list. If the committee and all the attendees can email me locations of stuff,
Dennis,
you know, we can
if I
read through
may,
it.
I will meet you and take you on a river walk.
And Dennis, I will send you my PowerPoint with the pictures of all the stuff I took that, yeah, from Fenimore Road up to 95, okay?
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
Dennis,
even
I would be
trying
happy
get
to
the
take
answers.
you on a river walk and show you what we're talking about.
May I come on that river walk as well?
You bet.
That's terrific. All right, I finally figured out how to unmute my phone.
Absolutely, Lou.
Can I just make an observation here?
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, I mean, you talked about Florence Park. I have documents from Florence Park that go back to 1981, and the flooding in Washingtonville back that far as well. So none of this is new. And I would say that anybody who's been studying or sitting on committees for all those years since, you know, and the mayor too. Somebody said the mayor should do this too, but everybody, and including Andrew, should just say, we're sorry we didn't do more. We're going to do better now. And that's what we have to do going forward, because it hasn't been addressed. This has been horribly neglected. We have a river maintenance program that has funds in it that hasn't been used. And it was created 8 years ago by at the suggestion of the Army Corps. They never spent the money, and they rated it 3 years ago. The Board of Trustees rated it, and that's the truth. They haven't spent it. So when we go on that river walk, you point it out, and we'll go get the stuff. And I want to tell Trustee Natchez also, yes, Trustee Natchez did bring up about the study or the engineering contract for the flats and Washingtonville, but he didn't vote for it because he didn't want the money to come out of the sewer program. He wanted it to come out of affordable housing. So the vote was 4-1. Trustee Natchez voted against it. So I just want to clear that up.
This is not the time for politics. You want to be.
It's not politics. I'm just correcting something you said that isn't true.
Gentlemen, respectfully, there's 30 people that want to be heard this evening. This is not the time to debate. There'll be another time for that.
I'm just correcting
This is not the
something
time
that
to
was
debate.
not true.
And respectfully, you want to know something? Define individuals who, they're not elected. These are volunteers on this flood mitigation advisory committee. These are the individuals who take time from their families, from their lives, to give back to the community that's so great to them, Trustee Young. And respectfully, these individuals are doing everything they can in their power. It's our elected officials, of whom you're one of them, okay, that we expect to lead the charge. When people are talking about what's being done, the communication, the transfer of and dissemination of information, we expect that from our elected officials. We're mere volunteers, Trustee Young. And furthermore, with regards to the past, I ask you on September 1st, why was our vac truck being maintained, not in service? And why didn't we contact a contractor to go to the Washingtonville, the industrial area, and the Heights to clean out the storm drains that we knew are problematic? Okay, so some of us were emailing and begging and pleading with the village to do that. So respectfully, these are hard-working individuals that are selflessly giving back to the community. And I think they're doing a pretty good job.
Okay, let's, I agree. Let's stop the politics. Let's get back on positive things we can do. I would like to move on to the other parts of the agenda. Okay. Okay, and for those, again, thank you. So let's keep going. So I'm going to go to something completely. Bea, I see you're on. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for sending me that Florence Park email. And I will be hopefully before the trustees at their next work session promoting an engineer to study the Florence Park area and come up with solutions. Okay. So I'd like to go to Catherine Dehaas next. Catherine, can you, Dan, can you promote Catherine Dehaas, please? And this has to do with river clean out, which is another volunteer effort. And I'm pretty sure Catherine is either spearheading it or She asked to talk about it, so I want to give her a few minutes.
I'm trying to find it. Okay.
DEHAIS.
I can't find her. She needs to raise her hand for.
Kate, Catherine, can you raise your hand, please?
Here we go. You should be able to talk now, Catherine.
Catherine, you have to unmute yourself.
Hi
Great.
there. Okay, I'll just speak very, very briefly. You know, I'm on the environmental committee, and of course, our committee is concerned about, you know, the debris in the river and also litter. So we're doing two things that relate to you. One is we're starting an initiative for doing better litter pickup in the village. You know, we're gonna go to get more garbage receptacles, to get more regular pickup of those garbage receptacles and so forth. So we're putting together a litter initiative. That's early days on that. The second thing is we have twice a year, our committee does cleanups in the village. That will be happening on Saturday, May 7th. And, you know, I know you have participated in the past. You know, we send out teams to all the different parks, and we're going to be focusing more on the streams this year. So I would welcome if any of you on the committee or anyone else in the community that can hear me wants to participate, please sign up for that. And if you would like to be a team leader in a specific area, for example, the walkway along Bub Walker Park to the community garden there has an enormous amount of litter in it along the riverway. We would definitely appreciate leadership in each of these areas. I think it's an informal process, but maybe with Dennis, it can become more formalized, whereby along with pictures of litter, I've also sent pictures of large garbage and so forth that I've seen in the river. And those have been forwarded by Jerry Barbiero to the harbor master, Jeff, I can't really think of his last name, but anyway, the harbor master, they've been renting cranes and have been removing large pieces of junk. So I'm sure Dennis can connect to that. So that's all I have to offer.
Catherine, if I could just jump in for a second, if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing these river cleanups for many, many years, and I
Right.
applaud the effort, but I've always suggested that April and May are too early to do them because you're still getting the heavy spring rains and the level of the rivers are high.
Right.
It would probably be more efficient to do one later in the summer when the river is much lower.
Right. Well, this is our regular spring
I
cleanup.
know it
We do
is, but
spring
maybe
cleanup and a
we should,
fall.
but maybe
So
we
to
should
the
think
extent-
about doing another one
Okay.
when the
fair
river
enough.
is really low, because
That's
it's
a good
easier to get
idea.
into it to get garbage.
Okay, because right now, you know, it's more about the area that's, you know, you can't get down into the river. And
But
that might not
but
even be
you can't get
that
into a
safe.
lot of the banks because the river is higher than it would be at other points in the year.
Yeah, well, you know, just from being out there
Just
last
comment.
week, I think there's a lot that can be done in May in a month. So, but then you know, I'll bring it to the committee that maybe we should have a third day like that. So this is a community-wide effort that everybody knows about. And so please, maybe, I'm not sure how you guys can communicate with me. I have a Village of Mamaroneck email, but anybody on your committee or community leaders, like, for example, Jim Abadi and people like that, who would like to be team leaders in different areas as part of this cleanup on May 7th, we would welcome your participation.
And Catherine, I would also suggest reaching out to the various neighborhood associations, Sure Acres or OPA and the Heights. There's so many different neighborhood organizations in the community that would be more than happy to assist. I would encourage you to
Thank you
do
very
that too.
much.
Kate,
Thank
is
you.
there a link on the Village of website that people can look at the event and maybe sign
There
up?
should be, I haven't actually checked, but I know there was in the fall, for the fall cleanup, there should be a sign up sheet there. And as far as being a team leader, they can communicate with me, sending me an email through the village.
All right, see if you can get, I mean, we have a person in the village, Cliff, whose last name I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah,
But I'm not gonna speak
I'm
for.
sure if it's not up there yet, it will be shortly.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Okay, yeah, I think that's important, okay?
Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, Kate. Okay. I wanted to talk about the regulations, okay? Let me just look through my agenda here to see. what-
Chair, there's
Yes.
4 other hands up on the right. I don't know if that's related to the topic or if we're moving on to the next, but you have 4. You have Tim, Leilani, Mindy, Ann, and Sandoval. So I see 4 people on my screen, but I don't know if.
Andrew, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I said there's 4 other people that have their hands up, or 3
Oh,
now.
all right,
I
so-
wasn't sure if they wanted to add on to the ACE
All right, so,
conversation
so
or
I,
we moving on.
right, and I now see Bea. So Dan, let Bea was put together that whole email. So can you let Bea promote Bea to speaking role?
Bea is on it. Sir Soli is on, Tony.
Hi, thank you for listening to me. First of all, I will also keep it positive, Mr. Gilbert, because I appreciate the committee agreeing to bring to the Board of Trustees the inclusion of Florence Park Avenue in the engineering study. That definitely is a positive. I think it's funny that Mr. Spatz said this was an old issue and I'm listed under old business. And we also don't want another study that's a dust collector, because there have been many studies. 1982 was a sanitary sewer study. There was a study in 2006. We have culverts running through the backyards of the people on Florence Street and Jensen Avenue. We don't know when that was put in. We don't know what shape it's in. So there's a lot to be investigated, but I'm confident and I'm happy to know that this is going to be hopefully a first step in reducing the flooding in our yards, in our basements, in our garages, because it has been an ongoing issue for many, many years. So I thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, well, you're welcome. Thanks for taking the effort and reaching out.
Tony, if I can just for a second, I never said that this was an old issue, FYI, or a study that would be on a bookshelf or collect dust. I'm very much in support of, and as the committee is, to expanding that study. So I think it's very important. There's nothing new when it comes to flooding because it's something that needs to be addressed today.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, I see Lou, you still have your hand up. Are you desperate to say something else, or good?
No, I just left it up. Sorry. Go on.
Trying to confuse me again. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm confused. It's okay.
There you go.
You have 2
Okay.
hands up. You have Leilani and Mindy.
All right, 2 more. Who?
Miss Reed and Mindy. There's 2. And Bernie.
Leilani, you're on.
Thank you. I almost just lowered my hand because I felt that if I did say something, that it would just be joining in the banter that has been going on. But I think the this committee that has been meeting for several years and doing this work on flood mitigation, it is very important, considering that I know my family, since we moved on Hillside, have experienced floods since the 80s, in one way or another. So I completely understand. I agree with Mr. Abadi in his comments. I agree, or I agree with Lou and what he says. I think that moving forward, and Elsa, most importantly, what Elsa said in terms of moving forward, it is everybody's responsibility. It's my responsibility. It's the whole town's responsibility to make sure that we ensure that these things keep moving. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to sit here and point fingers because that's not the purpose. You guys have done enough of that. But rather than just say that, granted, this may have been my first meeting, but this is not my first rodeo when it comes down to helping, dealing with the flood and helping my community. And maybe the reason why so many people have not joined in the meeting is because flooding is a traumatic experience. It's a huge loss on so many different levels. And if people haven't been joining, maybe they're just still trying to recover. And I just maybe thinking about that, because it takes all of you, it takes all of a person, mind, body, and soul, to deal with the aftermath of a flood. And not too many people, not everybody has the resources to bounce back. So I'm done. Thank you. And everybody.
Thank you, Leilani.
Okay, the last one is Annie.
Leilani,
sorry.
guys, and read.
Annie is now on.
And you have to unmute yourself. And you need to unmute yourself.
Bottom left. Oh, there she goes.
Oh, she got it. Hi, Ann. Go ahead, Ann, you're on. All right, Ann, we cannot hear you.
You have one more hand up, Tony's Mindy.
Dan, okay, Mindy.
Mindy is the last one.
All right, yeah. Hi, Mindy.
Yeah. Hi there. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having this meeting and letting us speak. I'm calling from Elliott Avenue. And I've been listening. This is the first time in the meeting here. And Leilani, you've really touched my heart, because it is traumatic. And thank you for saying that and talking for the people, not just for we want results, but, you know, surviving this flood and getting through it and still working every day to try to rebuild is traumatic. It's hard. And I hear that you guys are complaining or not having the information. And how do you get the information? What I'm not hearing is really what we can do. Okay, we're not getting the information. We're not invited to the meetings. The committee is not involved as it should be. Okay, so what is the action item that we need to do now in order to make that happen? He said become more aggressive, but who can become more aggressive? And what plan can we do together to actually reach out to those people who are in charge and can get us into these meetings and can hear us? What can we do? Not other than complain about it. I mean, there has to be some way that we can make sure that we don't get bypassed. That's one. So I would really like to see, maybe as a team together tonight, we can talk about community action to make our voices heard, not just to the committee, but make the committee's voice a little bit stronger to the leaders out there. That's one of the things that has been coming up for me. Another thing that came up for me is the plan. This is my first time in the meeting, so if I understand correctly, the plan from the Army Corps is the old plan. And they're now doing a design of it. And you mentioned a few areas that they're going to focus on up until 60%. So that means that we're only going to get 60% of the design work by August. Meanwhile, in 2 weeks, it's April and the rainy season starts. You know, we have a whole summer of hurricanes through September, and it's kind of scary right now as we're rebuilding our home on not just the plans, but what kind of action can we take now? Because I'm afraid, really afraid, because the rain's going to start. You know, it started raining this week. I don't know how many of you felt it, but we noticed.
Every time.
You know, we're looking at that. It's scary. So,
Mindy, just so you'll know, many of us on this committee have flooded extensively, so we understand your pain.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. So I think that I don't know if the city understands the pain so much, because it is traumatic, like Leilani said. It's really traumatic, and there's not enough action. There's not enough action.
We agree.
You know, Mindy.
And so what can we do? Let's take a few minutes. Maybe you guys can take a few minutes to discuss what can we do today.
Mindy, it's funny what you said. We a couple of minutes ago, I shared back in 2017, we had a seat at the table. Not only did we sit at the table here with the Army Corps, state, county representatives here in the village, but we went to the city. We went to the federal government in New York City. We also traveled to Washington. So what it illustrates, Mindy, it's been done and we can do it again. And we have to lean on our elected officials locally to open up that door, to encourage the communication, and not by brute force, but they should want to, as our elected officials, they should want and have the desire to communicate and bring us to the table. And I encourage that because it worked in 2017, it can work again. And
So you're
thanks to people
suggesting
like
that we all
yourself
turn directly to the mayor? Like, let's write letters now to the mayor?
and our
Get
elected
voices?
officials. Absolutely.
I would write emails to the board of trustees and the village manager.
Okay, very good. So like I say, everyone on this call, you said there's 30 people on the call. So, let's
Yeah.
start to take a little bit of action
start
as a
somewhere.
group to put pressure, because we need something done. It's hard to sleep at night.
You're absolutely right.
We know.
Something that Jimmy said, I think Jimmy Abadi,
Mhm.
he's a neighbor. He mentioned about the debris, that there's debris also in the yards of people's homes. As far as I understand it, the city is no longer collecting flood debris and construction
And I
debris.
think Dennis is going to bring that back. He's going to communicate that back to the municipality.
But
as
perhaps some photographs could be taken and sent to the committee, and we can pass them on to Dennis so that we can.
Okay, because
show
that
him
would help us a
what we're
lot, because
talking
it's
about.
tremendously expensive to get this stuff taken away, and we have to build walls, change electrical wires, and to be getting rid of debris, paying hundreds of dollars
Absolutely,
to
Mindy.
get rid of debris. I mean, I'd rather
Excuse
leave
me,
it in my yard.
Mindy?
Yeah.
May I know your last name, please?
Stern, Mindy Stern.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
on
you.
Nelson's
So
number
thank
one
you for
list.
hearing me
Respond to
out.
it.
Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Elsa. Absolutely.
Okay, so I think this has been really positive. And again, I really thank everybody for participating tonight. And there have been some suggestions on how you can take further action. Our next meeting is in April. I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Well, Tony, we had some other things on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm
to
not
discuss.
closing
No?
out. I'm just
Okay.
thanking people for the participation.
Okay.
I guess one other thing before we move on to regulations.
Tony, do you have that date certain? Do we have that date certain for the next meeting in April?
It's the fourth Tuesday.
Okay, just want to make sure because there's spring break. A lot of people going away for Easter, Passover, holidays, spring break. Great.
I've got it as the 26th.
Great, awesome.
4/26, so April 26th, Peg?
That's what I got.
Right, and I think according to our governor, after the 15th, we can have in-person meetings. So that might be a positive step also, okay? Before we go on to regulations though, I want to bring up floatables, right? And Stephen Glenner, you went around the village to take some look at that. And we talked about that floatables, meaning stuff that can float away and not really debris, but in Ida, under the Station Plaza Bridge, right? A trailer truck got stuck, I guess, and
Needle Lane Bridge.
a shed, right? And then one of them somehow went downstream and got stuck on another bridge.
The Needle
So,
Lane Bridge.
right, so Dennis, if you're still on, maybe you, Stephen, can you hook up with Dennis and share your pictures with him? Because these floatables, I mean, we could spend $88 million and then the floatable could come in and just ruin the project again. So I think this is a key, you can almost call this low hanging fruit, right? Because we went around the village and find everything that can float and either, I don't know how we get rid of it or how we tie it down, but I think this could be a big help in the near future.
There was also, if I may, an email a couple of weeks ago from Gina Van Eyck about a shed that had been taken out of the river and was put somewhere by North Shore Farms behind there by the river. And it's just sitting there and it was never removed. So Dennis,
so-
that might be something to look into as well.
Yeah, so because even if we got a foot or two of water, not 7 feet of water, one of those floatables gets stuck under the bridge again, we're right back to where we started, just what everyone is concerned about. So I think floatables we can take some clear action on floatables in a short period. So Dennis, can you work with Stephen on that, please?
I can to a degree.
Yeah, I know you can't solve it, but at least maybe, we could figure out what what are the low hanging fruit on the floatables, what's going to float first, or I don't know how we do it, but is that all right with you, Stephen?
Sure, Dennis, I'll send those over to you. I just would need your communication, your email or something.
I'm all over the website.
Okay, I'll find you.
So Dennis, if you send me a note, and then I'll circulate it. This way you'll have all of our emails, okay?
Okay, if I may talk quickly about what floatables are, right? When we have, when I've walked around the village and we've determined what is a problem, we have an issue inside people's yards. It's not an issue because our code permits people to have sheds, 1 by 20, 120 square feet. They can have construction materials. They can have all of this stuff close to the river on their property. So, unless something is passed administratively, perhaps the trustees, a change in our zoning code that would give the building department the ability to act on these floatables or items that could be washed away. I would say there's probably 24, 2 dozen to 3 dozen trampolines that were swallowed up by the Mamaroneck River. The shed that was stated that was yanked out of the river, it actually floated to that location by North Shore Farms. There was the Leaning Tower of coolers in the Mamaroneck River. Anything and everything that can possibly go went.
I once had a refrigerator that floated down the river.
Yeah,
Dennis, just so you know, the things I was more concerned with and I took pictures of were just like the trailers. And most of them were in the industrial section of Mamaroneck. So I don't know necessarily what the regulation is on that, but I mean, I really didn't look at little sheds in the backyards or anything. And so I don't know, this just to give you a preview of what we're talking about, at least what I was observing.
Dennis, you also should know that the DEC doesn't allow those types of things in the regulated floodway. So that we had, which actually trumps the village zoning that would allow it. That's something that is very serious to put in your arsenal of things to take care
What I
of.
would suggest is Steve, Dennis, Tony, or whomever, we convening, because again, we have a long agenda. This is obviously something that needs to be addressed and it's important. And we all are in agreement. So I think we could definitely take this offline and kind of arrive at a way to best approach it, but it's something that is manageable.
All right. So, yeah, I wanted to put it on though, because I think we should consider it low hanging fruit, because there's definitely stuff we can do.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks again, Dennis. Okay. So I want to just talk about regulations for a few minutes. I don't want this meeting to go on all night, but Peg did a bunch of work on putting together some summaries of regulations. I wanted to start with what I'm going to say is health and safety. And
Tony, if I may, why don't you give some background for the people who are listening, because they're not aware of what we're talking about.
Okay. And so right now in the floodplain, we have what we call floodplain development, right? And some of the problems with floodplain development is, health and safety. Can residents get out? Should we add residents? Should we add square footage to the floodplain, to residents in the floodplain? And so there's been a couple of approaches to this problem. And one of the approaches is simply that the regulations that we have need to be followed and enforced, right? Then there was discussion of a hiatus on building or developing in the floodplain, which I really don't want to go near. But I think following the existing regulations almost to the letter of the law, at least for now, before the Army Corps project takes place, is critical. And there is a current application, at least one or maybe more, in the floodplain. And FMAC, our committee, is not a regulatory land use committee, but we can give input into the other committees. And so, Peg, would you
Yes.
just summarize kind of the regulations and
So-
what the process needs to be?
So
And
this is for the benefit of our committee as well as everyone else. If a package is coming from the building department and going to planning, if a property is located in the flood zone or the floodway, the following needs to be included with the building department's packet. A complete short environmental assessment form, 2 copies of a property survey, a floodplain development permit, which includes a wetland activity permit if in a tidal wetland or buffer, or if it's in freshwater wetland, a wetland activity permit, base flood elevation certificate, proposed elevation of the lowest floor if it's a residence, proposed elevation to which the building will be flood-proofed if it's non-residential. And this came from the DEC. Any development partially or totally within the regulatory floodway must have an encroachment analysis, parentheses, or no rise analysis, completed by a professional engineer, which shows no rise when compared to pre and post conditions, which to me is one of the examples of that is a HECRAS study. So when an application comes before the planning board, if that property is in the flood zone or floodway, each of those criteria need to be met. So we were sent an application that the committee has received on 572 Van Rance Place.
so
But these
Peg,
documents were not included.
yeah, okay. So Peg, we had a request that not to hear the Van Vance thing tonight. We're not hearing it because we're not a land use committee. And
We're still
Dan,
supposed to opine.
yeah, so Dan responded to that request, I think properly. Dan, do you want to just elucidate that response briefly?
Yeah, but I'm happy to do that. But before I do, I want to suggest to Dan, I want to suggest that the short form environmental form that's on the village website in terms of the building department should actually be the forms from the DEC, which can be done online, but they will identify what the DEC has already mapped in terms of regulated areas from their vantage point, which takes a lot of the guesswork out of the building department having to try and do that or an applicant trying to do that. And it's very simple to do. All you have to do is give them the link. In terms of, there was a request from or an email from the applicant saying that they were concerned that this was a hearing and they were not notified. The FMAC is not a land use board and does not have quote hearings. They've asked to receive applications to review them and give recommendations if they so choose, good, bad, or indifferent, to any of the land use committees. The applicant is asked to appear before that, and I've said that's up to the chair to communicate, directly with them on that. But it is not a regulatory matter. It is a discussion in terms of what the FMAC's charge is, which is flooding, and anything that has to do with that is something that they should, be reviewing and commenting on if they feel that is necessary. But they do not have the role as a land use committee to actually hold a hearing and make a judgment. They can give recommendations, and holding that in a public forum, in a meeting forum, is a very desirable approach for transparency and discussion of flood issues.
Here, I would suggest, I am in receipt, as well as every member of our committee, of the email from the applicant's legal counsel. And I would encourage us to, I believe for transparency purposes, to incorporate and include the applicant if they're on this evening. If not, to allow that opportunity for them to participate, because we may have questions that we don't have in front of us, in addition to members of the community that are participating in the call or the Zoom this evening, to also be able to vet questions. So I think that for full transparency, I do think it's absolutely imperative to have the applicant present. Whether or not we're opining or not, it's troubling if we just render opinions without an applicant's input and our opportunity to ask questions. So I think that it balances it out if they're available.
Andrew, I'd like to suggest that you'd say, I would say they should be invited, but it's their decision as to whether or not.
Absolutely.
And also, what we have been asked to do by the Board of Trustees is to give an opinion on an application that was forwarded to us. And I think we've received our first application, and I think we as a group should be making recommendations based on the paperwork.
I just have a question. So if we're looking at the paperwork, and if I have a question that perhaps we can't answer, well, who do we ask? How do I outline?
It's going back to planning. All we're stating is, in order to make an application, you need to have a floodplain development permit.
And I agree.
And that's not included in your documentation. So we're going back to planning to say, where is this?
I agree with everything you're saying, but the only thing I'm suggesting is that if we're going to have this on an item, again, we're a volunteer group, at least for transparency purposes, make sure that everybody has the opportunity to participate. Now, I don't know whether or not if they knew or not, but the fact is if they didn't, then they should. This is the first one. And again, it's a teachable moment. I think that in the future, we have to, make sure that the other individuals are aware that we're going to be discussing it so they can participate. Again, the community has a chance, there's a dialogue. So that's, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, other than the fact that I think that, and this is a unique situation. Now, if they are not able to participate, they should be able to. Now, if we give them the opportunity and they don't want to, then you're right. That's on the applicant.
Andrew, I think one of the issues with that is we don't have direct communication with those people, and we have to actually establish a procedure of of how to get in touch with those people.
Right.
So until we have a procedure.
So let me say this. One is, I started this conversation that we were going to talk general regulations, basically not the Van Ness, right?
Right.
I think that we need the FMAC needs to tighten up the process. And Andrew, I hear your suggestion that they have an opportunity to be heard at the meeting.
Anybody.
Right, anybody. I agree. They were on the agenda, right? From when I sent it to our village, our person Sally, who puts it on the agenda. So if they had looked at our agenda today, they would see that they were on, that particular thing was on the agenda.
And they knew we were meeting tonight because they commented about that.
So as far as I'm concerned, as the chair, we have been totally transparent on this issue in deference to them at the moment, and just to make sure that we're being transparent. I'm saying we're just talking regulations tonight. And I think that Peggy's description and then Dan's addition to it, that the applicants have to follow this process, I think that could be our initial response to the other committees. And so I would say that unless our FMAC disagrees, I could send that to the land use committees just to say that the regulations need to be followed.
Tony, I was going to offer to put together a draft of exactly what wasn't included in this document we received from planning. And our recommendation is these points need to be included.
I think
It should be considered.
Yeah, I think one point about this is that we also don't know when they're going again, to the committee. If they're going again to the committee before we have a time to opine on it, then this could be lost.
So what I'd like to recommend is I'll draft a memo to our committee. I'll circulate it to everybody, comment back, and then Tony, you can submit it to planning.
And it's basically going to be that These are the application
These
requirements
are the points that we are missing in this that we feel is missing on.
that we
this
need to review.
application.
And then,
That's all.
Andrew, we can put them on the agenda for next month. That they can listen to our comments, and if we have additional items or whatever concerns or questions, that can happen next week, because as you said, this is a learning moment and it is the first. So yeah, do I have agreement on sending out an email to the other committees after a review by us all, and then putting 572 on for next month?
I would suggest, Tony, to add to that you would send an email to them saying that this will be on the agenda. They're welcome to come if they so choose.
Right.
But Dan, I don't want to be in charge of that. That's not my role. If I put that on the agenda, if you're an applicant in the floodplain, we're the flood committee, please look at the agenda. I just can't. And then
Wait, can I ask a question, Tony? Is there a way that when I go in front of zoning planning, you get a whole package. Is there a way that when you pick up that initial package, that can be included in one of the guidelines, so that whether it's the architect, the lawyer, whomever, your applicant knows that, okay, at one point or another, it's going to go down this avenue, and it's on me now to check the agenda. So it's not on you, Tony. It's not on Peggy or Elsa. It's the applicant's obligation.
Dennis, is that something that could be included in the building department requirements, or is there a way to, is he
You're
still?
talking about the building department, I think.
Yes, Dennis Strogan. Are you still here? Let's see, is he still on? Yeah,
Peg, that's
Dennis,
a good
are you
question.
still with us?
Peg, that's a good question, right? Let's send that to Dennis tomorrow. Or
I
Tony.
wanted to see if, I think he's off the call now. No, he's still on the call. Dennis, you here?
I see his name.
There he is. He's raising his hand.
Had his hand up, so can
Dennis,
somebody?
you're muted. You're muted, Dennis.
No, you have to promote him again, I think.
Do you need to
Dan.
promote him again, or is he just need?
Dennis, you can talk. Can you, you're still on mute though.
Calling Dennis. Dennis.
Can you unmute yourself?
All right, maybe he needed a break. I think we could all use a break.
Yeah. Let me just ask you though, because I mean, when Dan said maybe I should take a look originally and see if I could find the Van Ranst in some of the other proceedings. And when I was doing that, I found other applications that were in the water, within the floodplains. And we have not received any of those. I don't know where those went, but I mean, I'm talking about, but they were also from the Zoning Board of Appeals. They were from the Board of Architecture Review. So I don't know if we're going to get those or not, or if it's only going to be from somewhere else. I mean,
Actually, Stephen, that's a good question, because at what point, respectfully, Tony, Peg, and Dave, Elsa, we have a pretty large agenda as it is. Now we're going to be, and again, I understand the spirit and intent of this. How do we prioritize? How do we sort of keep up
It should
with
become automatic when something is sent to planning. If it is in a floodplain, it comes to us.
Okay.
because these are at different points now. Like they're at the Zoning Board of Appeals, they're in the Board of Architecture Review. With the two, I saw that
They may be
Republic.
too far down the road because we weren't established at that point, but somebody needs to opine on that. Dan, how can we get our hands around
Peg,
that?
we were there, but we weren't.
Dennis is back on. Dennis.
The directive was the Board of Trustees agreed and on staff was to implement that as any land use application comes in, it is to be distributed not to the land use boards and to FMAC at the same time for anything that's in the floodplain, period.
But is that, some of those applications may have started before this was enacted, so do they then retroactively have to go to
I
us?
think they've been going backward. going back to make sure that those applications have been sent if they're being processed.
They have not, well, we have the only one.
I'm
we've
saying
ever-
that's what we've been told. I don't, or I've been told.
So-
Maybe Dennis can share some light on that, or check into that tomorrow. Dennis, are you there?
Thanks, I appreciate it. So I'm on with two devices.
Yeah, I can't, you keep jumping around on my computer.
Going on. So, no breaks. Straight ahead all the time. As for the new applications coming in, everything should always be set with a trigger date, So whenever you submitted something to the building department or to our administrative, let's just say administrative level, we would have to go through that process until the building department will develop and adopt what was put out there. So this is the first time that I'm hearing of this.
That you're hearing of us being included in the process, or about this particular application?
About the process.
Okay, so Dennis, you may want to check with Jerry, because we did this at the board level, and that was the
months ago.
determination.
Okay, so I'll look into it a little bit more.
Thank you.
So going back to the original
And if
question-
that's not the instructions you're getting, please let me know, okay?
So, yeah, Dennis, what I think, so we need to get a flow of applications that are happening in the floodplain in a timely manner so that we have time to look at it. And we, as has been said, we're not a land use committee. We need so that we can opine on it. And this has happened on other committees, stuff doesn't get circulated until too late in the process, it doesn't do anybody any good. So we would like to get these applications right out of the gate so we can look at them, opine. It seems that from today's experience, the applicant might want to hear what we're having to say, obviously. So we would then, I would include them in our agenda, and or they would get notified somehow in the village that we were going to look at them that night. So if you could look into that, that would be great. Okay.
Absolutely. So, for any applications that are going to be in the floodway, not the flood zone or in the floodplain, it is limited on how many people are doing construction or site work in the floodway. So currently we have one application that went to BAR last week. So I can get a hold of the architect. He was actually in office today, so we just missed one window. But I can get a hold of the architect today and speak to Frank Tabalacci, who's the building, my head, the head of the department and the building inspector. And I'll have a discussion with him, and maybe we can get that to come to the board. Would they need site plan approval from the planning board? It's under a half acre. It would be an administrative SWIP that would be done for the property. It's actually just raising the house out of the floodway. It's still in the flood zone, but out of the floodway. But that would be an application that would come to you. That's what you're looking to see, correct?
Are you talking about the house on Winfield?
I am.
Well, that essentially isn't changing in terms of, there was already a structure there. So it's not, there's no more water being blocked than when the house was on the ground or up in the air, in fairness. That foundation was there, unless they're adding an addition.
So in this case, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
If they are lifting the home and there's.
Yes, they are.
They are lifting the home. But in
No,
the
but
course.
I appreciate that, but if they're strictly lifting the home based on the same footprint it was, they're really not changing. There was a structure in the flood path to begin with. It's not changing if it's not changing the footprint, it shouldn't be affecting the flow of water.
So now for clarity, right? Anything that isn't, any work that's being performed in the floodway, right? That should go to the committee. If there's nothing.
Floodplain as well.
Dennis, the actual language, if I can, because I wrote the language, excuse me, the actual language was when, if there was a new structure being created, an enlargement of an existing, I'm sorry, a new structure being created where there was no structure that exists, an enlargement of a structure that already exists. That those were the triggers. They weren't looking necessarily. I mean, if you have a building, that has a structure that is, not being enlarged in terms of the water flow, that was not necessarily the requirement. We weren't trying. I think the FMAC is trying to look at, things that would alter flooding in this
You're
village.
basically, Dan, altering the footprint of what was there. And if you're enlarging it or changing it, then that creates a separate set of issues and should be looked at by this committee.
Yeah, let me give you an example because I have a couple of ones that I wrote down. Like for instance, there's a Board of Architecture review agenda, and one of the items was 732 the Parkway, and the two people, homeowner, proposed a garage renovation enlargement. Zoning approval variance granted for pre-existing legally non-conforming garage. So that would be a case where they're making a garage larger, and that address is within a floodplain. So I would think that's the type of thing we'd want to look at because it's going to be taking up more space. Now, there
Yes.
was several examples like that, and that's just one of them.
So for me as a building inspector, right, when we say the term enlarging, we use that in our zoning code as well, which is a gray area in the code, and it's interpreted different ways depending on the design professional. So I understand, Dan, how you laid out the groundwork for that, right? So when a building inspector looks at expanding, enlarging a property, it's not just by the footprint of the home, but it's about the volume of the home. So if before we had a single family a single story ranch, which that was there before. Now we're increasing the volume, meaning the size. So it is now being built upward. Is there a change in the foundation on this property? The original proposal, I believe, was to be, let's say, was on posts or legs or piers. So that wouldn't impede the flow. There'll actually be less resistance. So, I haven't seen what Dan has written. I'm sorry about that. So, if you can forward that out to me, I'd like it. I'll have a conversation with Frank and Jerry as well. So I can educate myself on what you're basing it on. Yes.
Dennis, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to throw an aside in because I think it's relevant. When I elevated my house because of flooding, I was planning on putting 2 piers in for the addition. And we did not put the piers in because the head of the building department at the time would not let us do anything without a HECRAS study. So we ended up cantilevering the extension. So while the square footage of the house changed, the footprint did not.
So how onerous would it be to say, if there's an application for new construction or alteration in a floodway or a flood zone, we at least get a flag on it?
I agree with that statement. That's a very clear-cut ask. Anything that's being built in the floodway, you would like to see. In the flood zone, that's more of a reach because it's not in the floodway. So it depends on what you're determining.
We had originally said all flood areas, floodplain, floodway, and flood zone.
Okay, so you would be the catch-all to the HCZM.
So for example, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but Van Ranst is not in the flood way, but it's in the floodplain.
Right, and Dennis, if we could start with, we get an address and is there a way to us to get, if it's in the floodway or the floodplain, we get an address and a brief description of the application. It gets on our radar, and then I know Stephen and Peggy are very good at this. Not saying the rest of you aren't, but they could then poke into it a little bit and see.
Tony, anything that's going to planning, at the time that it goes to planning, a carbon copy should just be sent to us if it's in the floodplain.
Yeah, and also I was seeing when I was looking over the the review, they had a lot of stuff, they had, that, and then they had a lot of background stuff, which I did, honestly didn't look at, but they had all the paperwork that I guess you would have along with it in the Board of Architecture review note, minutes, or the zoning Board of Appeals minutes. So that all that kind of was there, for looking at. Obviously, for the purposes is I didn't look at it. If I probably looked at most of the stuff, I wouldn't hide a hair of a lot of it, but it is kind of all there,
So Dennis, what Peggy's saying is if it goes before the planning board and it's in a floodplain or a floodway, can we get kind of either notification, say?
Yeah.
Even if it so look into it, Dennis, and then get back to us on that, okay?
I will, but I just, so maybe when we're off the Zoom, we can have a logistics conversation.
That's what I suggested. I think that would be a good idea for you guys.
Maybe one more thing I'll add to the after list.
Okay, great. All right, so I'd like to wrap this meeting up. Is there any other absolutely urgent business for this evening? Dan? Peg?
Nope.
Andrew?
Tony,
Dave?
thank you very
Kelly,
much.
Elsa?
wait, Kelly has his hand back up, I think.
Yeah, can I just make one suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you all very much. Obviously, Mindy, who spoke earlier, rather inspired me because I was going to say the same thing. Is there an email list or some sort of call to action list that we can
We
get
had
on?
one once, Tony, back in 2017. You guys put one together. So
Yeah, it sounds like something that I think would be very helpful if we
we
had.
had one.
Yeah,
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we had
so-
one, and that is.
Yeah, so we can get updates, obviously, and then you can say, hey, we need you to email the mayor. We need you to email so-and-so. I'll do it. And it sounds like, one of the positives in this meeting tonight is there's a lot of passion out there. There's a lot of people that are really want to see this move forward. So if you could just give us an email to start with, and we can sign up and we can get this thing powering forward and move on to April.
Kelly, you still have 17 people that are still on. It would be helpful if they would send their emails, and then we can start creating that list and, build on it from there.
All right.
So we can just send it to Tony then?
Sure, you can send it to Tony if you don't. or you
Village
can-
email.
Yeah, there's a village email for Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee. Absolutely.
Just send it to FMAC. It's called Flood on the village email.
Thank you very much.
All right, so a motion, can I get a motion to close
Yes.
the meeting?
Yeah, before the closing meeting, I just wanted to mention this one thing. I think we should try to find out when the next Van Rans planning meeting is, because if it happens before the next flood mitigation meeting, this will all be for naught. So I think we should try to find that out. And if it happens to be before then, I think we should maybe have a meeting between us and just, another public meeting between us and discuss that before the actual meeting.
I'm going to put comments together anyway, so everyone will have them.
All right, that's a good idea, Steve.
Steve,
Okay.
I don't think, I don't know when the next meeting is that they will be on, but I don't think it's going to move as quickly as that would preclude you from meeting in your next meeting to review whatever you'd like to review.
Yeah,
Chair,
okay.
members of Flood Mitigation, I've got to jam.
All right, so
Good night,
Andrew, give me
everybody.
30 more seconds. So let's see, who was it? Kelly, you mentioned positive again. So I think this has been a really positive meeting. Thank you, FMAC members. Thank you, everyone who has shown up, who's spoken. I think we got the energy back. And Andrew, you mentioned that in 2016, we had a lot of energy going. I think we got the energy back. This is really great and important. We've got money, we've got people with brains, we got people with passion. So I need a motion to close the meeting.
Motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Favor. Yes.
Okay, everybody, have a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you,
again,
Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you, Dan.
Night.
Chair, do you want to stay on to have this conversation now?
Hi, Dennis. Yeah, I could stay on for a minute.
This is going to be, I think, You voted to close the meeting. We have to close the meeting. Tony.
Dennis, I'll speak to you. I'll speak to you. I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Okay, done.